Hi everyone, welcome to another Reasons and Resources video. So as you can see here, this particular video is going to look at reasons and resources for learning the Go language, or Golang as it's often referred to. This is another language where my personal reasons for learning it are purely interest, in as much as it's not a language I've actively had to seek out because I needed to program in it. It's only come about as a result of reading other books on programming, particularly programming language explorations, which I've mentioned on numerous occasions, which I'm working my way through. And I also recently acquired a copy of one of the Golang programming language books, which is often recommended for learning it, and no doubt there will be a future My Life in Objects episode where I'm going to flick through the particular book I bought, and I'll show you in a moment which book I purchased. I've also been working through Go as part of my programming, my polyglot programming WordPress site. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end as well. But so far, I suppose my point is I've not had to use this to actually formally produce any code for any personal project or business project outside of the stuff I've put together purely to teach myself the language, and enough to get the entry on my web page, on my WordPress web page, up and running. So why might, outside of the reasons why I want to learn the language, what other reasons might there be for me learning it, and what reasons might there be for anybody watching this video to learn it beyond just a natural curiosity for programming languages? Well, one of the things that comes up, I think, quite a bit is obviously performance. So I believe that it has high performance, something akin to something like C or C++, because of the way and what ultimately Go is compiled to. You've also got concurrency in the language. A lot of languages I've been talking about recently have built-in support for concurrent programming. So, if you have this either built-in feature or routines and libraries that help assist concurrent programming, then that obviously makes it ideal for developing solutions that are scalable and can have code that runs in parallel. It's a simplistic language, the language, or the simplicity there, the language syntax, when you look at it, is pretty clean as far as languages go, pretty straightforward. And when languages are like that, that allows you to focus more on solving problems as opposed to trying to manage these like complex language constructs that often you'll come across in some languages. We've got a few examples here of Go code. As with a lot of languages, there's a pretty robust standard library which covers all those essential tasks that you might need for developing various applications in various domains. Obviously that's quite nice when you have a fairly robust standard library, because you don't have to sort of go out to external sources. Not that that's necessarily a problem, but obviously it's quite nice when a lot of the main features that you want to use day in, day out are actually built into the standard library. In terms of the industry adoption, it's my understanding that there's many leading companies outside of the obvious one, which is Google, but Google, Uber, Dropbox, Docker use Go. So that's really handy if you're learning a language to boost your potential opportunities with a certain career path. Is knowing which leading companies are using which programming languages. And if you go through the Wikipedia article, which I'll include a link to as I do in all these episodes, you can sort of drill down through and see what sort of applications it's been used for, what the reception's like, how it crops up on those famous end of year lists or halfway through year lists or surveys that are done in various ways, which we'll talk about in a moment. One particular that I always like to look at every year when it comes out. There's actually been a naming dispute as well with the language. And if you want to dig into the history of the language, so as I mentioned, no surprise that one of the leading companies that use it is Google, because it was designed by them to improve programming productivity. And a few other reasons. I mean, if you're interested in exploring statically typed languages, and also just adding a general purpose language to your repertoire, to your portfolio, then it's another interesting one to explore. It's got it's multi-paradigm, so you've got concurrency in there, which you've spoken about, imperative, functional, object oriented, those sort of things. So last stable release 3rd of December 2024, as of the shooting of this video, 41 days ago. So you can see that there's obviously regular release schedule. It's been around since 2009. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the survey from what it would be 2024, because the 2025 survey doesn't usually come out on Stack Overflow until sometime around sort of June, July. So the 2024 one, which is the most recent one, and if we look on here, we can see in terms of most popular technologies, which the results are as in response to this particular question on the survey. And if we look down the list through the usual suspects, we can see here we've got Go somewhere between PHP, PowerShell, and things like Rust and Kotlin. Oh, there's Lua. So just below this sort of group of languages, which we sort of see come up again and again. Then we've got this lovely admired and desired, which always intrigues me, pretty high up on there. Again, you get this quite wide range between the admired percentage, which is 67.7, and the desired percentage, which is 23.1. Obviously, it seems to be just the nature of this particular question and how the results were interpreted. I mean, some things are pretty tight, like Python has quite a low gap with it, but you can see some of the other ones like Elixir, Fortran, it's pretty pretty low and narrow. And as for Prolog, I mean, I've had it fun to dabble in Prolog myself. Yeah, so there we go. Just on this one, what we are just below Rust and just above Bash / Shell and above C# and C++ on that particular metric. And I find it really useful actually to look through the lens of different metrics for programming languages when you're trying to make a decision based on, say, your career opportunities or, generally what the field is like out there. And also, how well it might pay. So Go's an interesting one. And in fact, I think I might have mentioned before, when I do that yearly breakdown of the survey where I sort of compare the year's Stack Overflow survey against previous years, you've probably seen me mention that one of the languages which has consistently been on in that survey year after year in both the top paying and the most popular technology charts is Go. And because it's no surprise, and the reason being is that it always seems to come quite high up in the various surveys consistently. So again, it's quite high up on here. And in this instance, we're below things like F# List and Groovy, and above things like Rustzig and Bash Shell. We've got things like MicroPython, which is a specialised version of Python. And as I mentioned before, we've got the two Beam languages, one of a few that run on the Beam virtual machine, have bubbled up this year. But as I mentioned before, Clojure constantly gets near the top on this, and you probably guess that often this is a fairly good indicator, within reasons, where demand for the language outstrips the amount of people out there that can actually program in it at that point in time. So that's why you might get languages that are more widely used, like JavaScript, for instance, on this particular chart end up further down, because I suspect that there's a lot more people out there that know JavaScript than know, say, Erlang, Elixir, or, case in point for this video, Go. Really good resources online, as with several languages you looked at. A great starting point is obviously the dedicated website for the language, and because it's used a lot by other companies, you'll find that the information on here is pretty robust. There's a lot of good stuff. We'll look at some of this in a moment and get onto other stuff outside the site. As always, I'll include all the links, and I think I've said in the past, when I'm looking at a language for the first time, I tend to do three things in fairly much in parallel, which is to read through the Wikipedia article, check out what I consider to be like the main resource site, and then look at some of the interviews with the programming people involved, the language developers involved, and then maybe dabble a bit on exorcism, and certainly start asking interesting questions about the language on whichever of the large language model APIs you like to use to do that. So we've got how to install it. Pretty straightforward, I think. And I think, as I've mentioned, my sort of go-to, excuse the pun, my go-to way of running things is to install the main, whatever the tool chain is, and then go to the marketplace for Visual Studio Code, get the particular code highlighter, and then run everything inside of Visual Studio Code. But everybody's different, and of course if you've got a Mac or Linux, your choice of IDEs, your choice of what particular tool chain, how you install it might be different. But this is my sort of preferred route. I always install it and then check that at the very least I can do some sort of language development with, say, something as simple as Notepad and the command line once I've installed the main tool chain, and then sort of go out from there. Very nice set of tutorials here, very nicely laid out. You can work your way through that, all online. Got plenty of documentation, both in terms of the tutorials and certain things that are useful to know, maybe certain idioms with the language, certain strengths in the language, certain APIs that are heavily used in the language, that sort of stuff. we've got this interesting interactive tour of Go here, which is one of these. I do like these, like, sand pits, whatever you want to call them, tours, where you can sort of sit there, try out some code within reason. I use this a lot, these sort of things quite a bit actually, when I'm developing content through the large language models for different languages, and then obviously running the code in here to make sure it works properly as intended. This is another site which has an interesting map. There was a language that has an interesting map. There was a language before, I can't remember, which had a similar thing where you can sort of go in and see on a map where the Go developers are. Here it's done through the lens of Meetup, so upcoming events, but I quite like these as ways of finding a community. Here's the books page we're still on the Go website here. So this is a book I bought recently, but you can see there's several recommendations here. More tutorials, more training, that sort of thing. And then here's the page about the Go programming language. Published in 2015. And we've got some example chapters here you can take a look at. I basically wanted this for my programming bookshelf. And a number of really useful videos. I mean, there's a ton of videos around Go. So we've got stuff on the Go for Academy, Go for Con 2015. I've brought up this one, The Evolution of Go, which I thought was pretty interesting. Another one from 2023, which is a review of what they got right, what they got wrong. So I always find those two types of videos interesting to look at. So the evolution of the language video, followed by, okay, this is where we messed up video. That's always good. So understand the pathway first, and then have a look and see what people are saying. Well, yeah, we could have done this better, or we got this right. Interview with Brian Kerrigan. Interview with the Go team from 2012. Yeah. So, yep. And there's the Go for Con website, which I'll include a direct link to as well. It's always nice when there's YouTube channels dedicated to the particular conferences. This is the UK one. Number of podcasts you can check out, so I'll include a link to that. As I've said, it's on Exorcism. I do like going through this. This actually has a key concepts section on it as well, so you can both learn and practice. With some languages on Exorcism, there is only sort of practice, but with Go you get this sort of learning route. So you get this nice map where you can go through, learn the basic concepts before you move on to maybe slightly harder ones. So very nice. You can sort of go through, learn it all from here, sort of as an alternative or as a complement to using a book, say. And then in addition to that, you can obviously go through, and once you've done the relevant section, do the practice associating with it. You can see, there's a tutorial exercise, a learning exercise, and so on. And these go through in varying degrees of difficulty. You can see with some of these, there's not any necessarily corresponding learning exercise, but it's building on an earlier learning exercise. Stuff you've done before. So what I'm getting at is there may not be a parallel learning exercise which is sort of forms part of the code as well. Yeah. So sometimes you get the two alongside one another. Sometimes they're individual from one another, and sometimes there's literally only a a coding exercise. But usually at the very minimum you find some sort of explanation. And I find it's always really useful now. I'm getting much more into checking out the coding tests as well that it actually uses to evaluate your coding. They're pretty interesting. And then finally, shameless plug, Go, I'm featuring in the Programming Polyglot WordPress site. If you're interested in my particular project, then you can read about it in the About section. What my motivation for doing this is, but it's been really valuable alongside these Reasons and Resources episodes. And there is one on Go, so we go through the usual things about the language, binding and scope in the language, functions and closures, frames and argument passing, prototypes and classes, extensions and so on. And so for each language it's always the same group of things I'm talking about, but of course in some languages they may be implemented different than others. The term might have a slightly different connotation in another language, but also it may not be formally implemented at all. And so in some of these, we talk about things that are maybe close to that, which can be used in a similar way, or even, might say, well, that particular feature isn't there at all. But obviously things like operators are going to be in every language, as are things like control flow. But if you've had any experience of different languages, you'll find that some control features are present in some languages and others they are not. So pretty interesting way of looking at language. And these are all categories that I've borrowed, got insight from reading that Programming Language Explorations book, which I've mentioned quite a few times. And I will include a link in the general section of the description for this. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.